was a cold and cloudy evening in November, and I had decided to go for a walk to clear my head. I put on my coat and headphones and set out on the familiar path through my neighborhood. As I walked, the sky grew darker and the wind picked up. I pulled my coat tighter around me and picked up the pace, hoping to make it back home before the rain started. Just as I was about to turn back onto my street, a car slowed down beside me, and a man's voice called out, "Hey, give me your wallet." I couldn't see the man's face, but I could see that he was holding something in his hand. My heart raced as I realized he has a gun. Without thinking, I turned and ran as fast as I could, my feet pounding the pavement. I could hear the car starting to follow me, and I knew I had to find a way to escape. I darted down an alleyway and hid behind a dumpster, panting and shaking. I could hear the car coming closer and closer, and I knew I had to keep moving. I crept along the alleyway, trying to stay hidden in the shadows. My mind was racing as I searched for a way out. Just when I thought I was doomed, I spotted a ladder leading up to a fire escape. I scrambled up it as quickly as I could, pulling myself onto the safety of the metal platform. I crouched there for what felt like hours, waiting for the danger to pass. Eventually, the car drove away, and I was able to make my way back home. I locked the door behind me and collapsed onto the couch, shaking and covered in sweat. I couldn't believe what had just happened. I had narrowly escaped an attempted robbery. From now on, I promised myself I would always be extra careful when walking alone at night, and I would always make sure to have a way to call for help in case of an emergency. It was a scary and stressful experience, but it had taught me a valuable lesson. I was just grateful to have made it out alive and unharmed. I sat on the couch for a few minutes, trying to calm my racing heart and steady my breathing. Once I felt a little more composed, I stood up and walked over to the window, peering out into the darkness. The street was empty and quiet, and there was no sign of the black car or the man who had tried to rob me. I let out a sigh of relief, but I knew that I couldn't just sit here and do nothing. I needed to report this incident to the police in case the man tried to rob someone else. I grabbed my phone and dialed the emergency number, explaining what had happened to the operator. She assured me that a patrol car would be sent to my address as soon as possible, and asked me a series of questions about the man and the car. I tried my best to describe them, but my memory was a little hazy from the adrenaline and fear. I hung up the phone and sat down on the couch again, waiting for the police to arrive. My mind kept racing, going over every detail of the incident and wondering what could have happened if I had been caught. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I heard the sound of a siren approaching. I stood up and walked to the door, ready to greet the officers and give them my statement. I knew that this was just the beginning of a long and potentially stressful process, but I was determined to do everything I could to help catch the man who had tried to rob me. I hoped that by speaking out and sharing my story, I could prevent someone else from going through the same terrifying experience. It was a warm summer evening in July, and I had decided to go for a walk on the nearby trail to clear my head. I put on my sneakers and set out on the familiar path through the woods. As I walked, the sun began to set, and the air grew cooler. I pulled my jacket tighter around me and picked up the pace, hoping to make it back home before it got too dark. But as I walked, I began to feel like I was being followed. The sound of footsteps behind me seemed to get closer and closer, and every time I turned around, there was nobody there. I started to feel uneasy, and I knew I had to find a way to escape. I glanced around, searching for any sign of civilization or a place to hide. Just when I thought I was doomed, I spotted a fork in the path ahead. I hesitated for a moment, trying to decide which way to go. To the left, the path seemed to wind deeper into the woods. To the right, it led back towards the park. I weighed my options, wondering which path would be safest. As the footsteps behind me grew louder, I knew I had to make a decision. I turned to the right and started to run, hoping to make it back to civilization before it was too late. I could hear the person behind me getting closer, but I didn't dare look back. I just focused on putting one foot in front of the other and getting as far away as possible. As I ran, my heart pounding in my chest, I knew that I couldn't keep this up for much longer. I had to find a way to escape, or else I might never make it home. I ran as fast as I could, my sneakers pounding the pavement. I could hear the person behind me getting closer, but I refused to give up. I knew that if I stopped, it would all be over. So I kept going, my legs aching and my lungs burning. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I saw the lights of the park up ahead. I redoubled my efforts, pushing myself harder than I ever had before. I could hear the person behind me panting and gasping, but I didn't look back. I just kept running, my eyes fixed on the safety of the park. As I burst through the tree line and onto the open grass, I saw a group of people playing frisbee in the distance. I shouted for help, my voice hoarse and strained. The people looked up, surprised, and then ran towards me as I collapsed to the ground, exhausted and shaking. I told them what had happened, and they helped me to my feet and walked me to the nearest bench. I sat there for a few minutes, trying to catch my breath and calm my racing heart. As I sat there, I couldn't help but wonder who that person had been and what their intentions had been. I knew that I had to be more careful in the future and make sure to always have a way to call for help in case of an emergency. I was on a road trip to visit some friends out west, and I had planned to stop at some parks and nature reserves along the way to get some exercise and fresh air. I had always loved hiking and exploring new places, and this trip seemed like the perfect opportunity to do that. On the third day of my journey, I saw a sign for a park with a hiking trail and decided to take a break. The trail looked beautiful and peaceful, and I was looking forward to getting out of the car and stretching my legs. As I walked down the path, I marveled at the beauty of the surrounding woods. The sunlight filtered through the leaves overhead, and I could hear the birds singing in the trees. I was completely immersed in the peacefulness of the forest, lost in my own thoughts. Suddenly I heard a loud noise behind me. I turned to see a woman emerging from the underbrush, her face contorted in anger. She was young with long blonde hair and a wild look in her eyes. She was yelling at me in a language I didn't understand, and I had no idea what was going on. I tried to explain that I was just out for a hike, but the woman wouldn't listen. She kept yelling and gesturing wildly, her face turning red with rage. I realized that she thought I was trespassing on her property, but that wouldn't make any sense because this is a park. Not only that, but I had been following the trail and never saw no signs indicating that it was private land. As I backed away from the woman, I could see that she was clearly on drugs. Her eyes were dilated and she was sweating profusely, and she kept mumbling incoherently to herself. I knew I needed to get out of there as fast as possible. I turned and ran back the way I had come, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear the woman's footsteps behind me, getting closer and closer. I didn't dare look back. I just kept running as fast as I could. Finally, I burst out of the woods and into the parking lot where I had left my car. I fumbled with the keys, trying to unlock the door as quickly as possible. Just as I was about to get in, I heard the woman's voice behind me still yelling and threatening to call the police. I couldn't believe what was happening. I had just wanted to take a peaceful hike in a public park, and now I was being by an angry, drug-addled woman. I was not in control of that situation at all. All I knew was that I had to get as far away from that woman as possible.